Hey folks, good afternoon. So I just want to do a really quick presentation on entering the conversation. We have a reading for this Tuesday on They Say, I Say. This is a crucial reading. This is a crucial piece of understanding how to make arguments and how to enter the research conversation. So your assignment this week, your discussion board assignment, is to use these templates and to respond to the conversation that has been happening on hip hop therapy. And you do that by agreeing, right, disagreeing, or both with these critics, right, on hip hop therapy. So, I agree with them because, I disagree with them because, or, I both agree and disagree. And of course, you need to give reasons for why you agree and disagree. Um, so let's just go through a little bit of this. So, folks, think of it as this way: college writing, um, professional writing. It's entering a conversation, okay? And the conversation that we've chosen to enter is hip hop, and specifically with this first major paper, we're doing hip hop therapy, right? So a more specific, specialized form of this general conversation. So I like this metaphor of, you're late to a party, and what do you do when you come late to a party? You ask people what they've been talking about, right? So before you can start talking, you have to say, what have we been talking about? What's going on? And you listen. So that's sort of a metaphor for the research conversation. We're all late to this party, right? Where they've been talking about hip hop therapy for about a decade now, right? This conversation started about 10, 15 years ago. So we're all late to that conversation. So that's why we're right reading these sources on hip hop therapy. We're listening to these critics. What is this thing? What are they saying? Um, so that's a good metaphor for understanding it as, we're late to this party. They've been talking about this topic, and we have to listen. So I like this idea of, you don't make arguments unless provoked, right? College writing, professional writing, it's always in response. I'll repeat that. It's always in response to something that's already been said, right? You can't argue effectively without being in conversation with someone. So for this paper, you have to enter this research conversation. You have to name a critic from one of the hip hop therapy articles that we've read. So just name the critic. Use that critic to represent the hip hop therapy conversation, right? They are writing about hip hop therapy, so they represent this larger conversation that's happening. So again, right, professional writing has one underlying feature. It is deeply engaged with other people's views, right? That is writing. It is responding to a real conversation that's been happening, right? We're not making up conversations. If we don't enter the conversation and if we just ignore what's been happening, we'll just repeat, right? Usually what's already been said, and pass it off as our own. So you really want to cite the conversation and then enter it, and that's where you can say something new, right? By first saying, okay, they've said this. Now I want to say something else. Um, so again, right, just nailing this idea of professional writing, academic college writing, whatever you want to call it, right? It's a response to what others have said. And indeed, the best way to discover, right, your own claim, right, your own insight, your own idea, is to listen to others, right, see what they've said, and then you look for an opening, right? You look for something that wasn't said, or you look for something that doesn't sit right with you. And you're like, that bothers me. What can I add to that? Right? That's where a good claim comes from, is you've listened to the conversation, you've summarized it, right? And then, right, find a hole. Find something that's not been said, or find something that you can add, or something that you can make a connection to. That is a good claim, right? It starts by listening, summarizing, and then you generate an idea from that. So, right, that gets us to the I say portion. right? You start with the they say, right? The critics on hip hop therapy, they define it as this. They say that it's great for working with these populations in these situations. Okay, that's the they say. Now your turn is, well, what do you think? Right? Where can you come in? Right? Agree and explain why, disagree and explain why, or some combination of you agree and disagree with this conversation, right? So folks, think of it this way. We're not agreeing or disagreeing broadly with hip hop therapy, right? This has been around for almost 2 decades. It works, it's effective. So you really can't be like, well, I disagree with hip hop therapy. That's too broad of a claim, right? It's like disagreeing with climate change, right? It's proven, okay? So hip hop therapy is proven to work. So you're not agreeing or disagreeing with, oh, does this thing work, right? Is it effective? That is proven, right? So we're not going up against that. But what you are agreeing with, what you are disagreeing with is, well, what is the best way to use hip hop therapy? What is the best way to use hip hop therapy with certain populations? Well, where should we use hip hop therapy? When should we use hip hop therapy? How? Right? Why should we use hip hop therapy? That's where you can come in and agree and disagree, or both, right? So if you notice, a lot of our readings on hip hop therapy, it's mostly in the schools, right? So you can agree with that, right? I agree that, it's a good idea to put this in the schools. It works really well with young people. But I also want to disagree with this premise that it should only be used in the schools. Why can't we use it with veterans? Why can't we use it in nursing homes? Why can't we use hip hop therapy in other places outside of a school setting or a therapy setting or a counseling setting, right? Why can't we use it in nursing homes? Why can't we use it in prisons? So that's me agreeing and disagreeing with how it should best be used and in what place it should be used, right? I'm agreeing and disagreeing. So that's really your job for this paper, is you are adding on to this conversation on hip hop therapy, right? We can start with agreement, right? Hip hop therapy, it works, it's really effective, right? In helping people get off of drugs, in helping people develop their self-esteem. But, right, I want to add something else, right? I want to add another population, right? I want to argue that it works best with another population that hasn't been focused on, right? For example, little K through 6 or K through 8, that is not a population that our critics talk about. So while I agree that hip hop therapy is widely successful, right, I also want to add, right, I want to enter the conversation and say, well, I think it should be used with, kindergarten through 8th grade kids as well, right? And here are my reasons. Let me explain why, right, I'm arguing that. So folks, I hope this was helpful, right? Major paper 1 is all about entering the conversation, summarizing a critic, right? Name one critic that you read on hip hop therapy. What are they saying? What are they arguing? And then your job is to agree and explain why, disagree and explain why, or do you both agree and disagree, right? But you need to enter this conversation, right? You need to find a hole, find an opening, find something that you can add, right? Is it a population? Is it a place where hip hop therapy is unexplored, right? Like working with veterans, right? That's not mentioned in these articles. So start thinking about populations and other places, or how, right? How best to use hip hop therapy, or which artists do you think are best to use in hip hop therapy? Would you use a gangster rapper for K through 6? Probably not, right? Would you use a socially conscious rapper? Probably, right? So there's differences, right? Would you use a Christian hip hop artist in a Catholic school? Would you use, right? There's so many ways to enter this conversation, right? If you want to get into religion, population, age, sexual orientation, there's so many ways to go with this. So that's all open for you. That's where you come in, right? Is to get into this nitty gritty. Okay, folks. Thank you. Have a great week.